Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you to Bulb and for TRG for having me here and giving me the opportunity to talk at the first DevOps Roundabout and also as a first talk. So I think for a lot of people interested in DevOps, there is always the question, where do I start? If I'm already not doing it, how can I be good at DevOps? How can I ensure that my company is following the practices? And hopefully, with my talk, you may get some better ideas where to go, how to embark on that journey. So a little bit of introduction. My name is Bartosz Jedrzejewski. I'm a technical principal for Scott Logic. I wrote a white paper called The Journey to DevOps, same title as this talk and kind of very, very similar really topic. I blog a lot at e4developer.com, over 100 articles on microservices and DevOps, so if you're interested, and I'm active on Twitter. If you want to kind of ask me questions or argue with me afterwards, then I'm always happy to, for an argument, in a good spirit, hopefully. All right, so I think it's only okay to introduce DevOps at this first talk. I'm sure many of you are already well familiar with DevOps, but people often have kind of different ideas what DevOps is, what DevOps isn't, and they're wondering, well, am I really doing DevOps, or the fact that I have continuous integration mean that I'm doing DevOps? Well, let's see. First of all, does anyone here have DevOps in their job title? It's kind of popular. I don't know. Raise your hands if you do. Quite a lot. Yeah, it's quite common. I've even worked with a team that had DevOps in their title, but DevOps is not really job title. So you may disagree because evidently you can have DevOps in a job title, but some companies have this idea that they can just say, okay, we need to do DevOps. How do we do it? We have QA team, we have dev team. Well, DevOps team, 4 people, put adverts somewhere on LinkedIn, get 4 guys, boom, DevOps, done, job done. So unfortunately, it's not that easy. So it's not the job title. Yes, you need people to do DevOps, but you need more than just a title. It's not a set of tools. There is another misconception that's quite common. People get Jenkins, they get some Terraform, they start using GitLab, and they go, hey, DevOps, because we have Jenkins. And Jenkins been here and Hudson and other similar CI products, they've been here for a while. So again, it's the same thing. You need some tools, but they don't really equal DevOps. That's not what is it all about. And even more kind of surprisingly, DevOps is not continuous integration and delivery. These are practices, these are things that you should be doing probably, but they don't make necessarily magically your organization into a DevOps organization. So I've been talking a lot what DevOps is not, and this talk is supposed to be about DevOps, so maybe let's talk about what DevOps is for a change. So DevOps is a set of practices that create DevOps culture. And again, you may think I'm kind of hiding here a bit, saying, oh, you just now you say DevOps culture, and what is that? You're still not saying us what it really is. And who are you to tell us who DevOps is, right? We all have our own ideas. So my excuse is that it's not me telling you. It's actually the guys who wrote the DevOps handbook. And they're the guys who kind of created the movement, or maybe officialized the movement. So DevOps as a word really only goes to as far as 2009, so we have kind of 10th anniversary now, which is great. And that's when Patrick Debois created the first DevOps Days conference, where basically the like-minded individuals with the similar ideas got together and started exchanging their experience on that. And this seminal book on DevOps was published in 2016, and I think that's when DevOps really hit mainstream. That's where suddenly everyone started creating this DevOps team, advertising for DevOps roles, and we started giving it a name in public. At least that's where most people, I think, kind of really started to get more idea what it is. And in 2019, basically DevOps is used everywhere. It's actually crazy how little time it took. You can go to most banks, you'll have people talking about DevOps. You can go to Bulb, people talk about DevOps. You can talk to, you can go to the government, and governments are not the fastest kind of people out there, and they are, having DevOps team. They're thinking about DevOps, and they're actually doing DevOps, to be honest. So this is, I think, quite a rapid adoption, and I believe this rapid adoption comes from the fact that it just works. It does change the way you deliver software. It does improve your outcomes, and I think it's enough kind of setting up the scene before I can tell you what it really boils down to. So this whole book and all these guys, they really focus on 3 key things here. That they call it the 3 ways of DevOps. And they're really simple when you think about it. It's all about flow. So flow is kind of your flow of work through the system. So imagine you have different like workstation. You just imagine like a conveyor belt, and one part is your developer's computer. The other one is your Git, let's say. The other one is your CI, continuous integration environment that you deploy into. The other one is some production system. So flow is just making sure that any work you do kind of jumps between these stations as fast as possible. So obviously, when you can deliver work very quickly, all the way from inception, from business people ideas to the customer, that means you're achieving really high flow. But if you're delivering nothing but bugs and disappointments, that's not a great thing as well. So, imagine someone came up with a great idea how to make, your electric car even better, but what it turns out is that, it catches on fire the moment you push that in production. So, sure, you deliver it to production, but it's a disaster. You need to go back, you need to rethink everything, you need to redo it, and you're wasting everyone's time. So you want these very tight feedback loops. You want to make sure that between every station, between, let's say, a developer's computer and Git repository, there is a unit test that will run that will kind of give you a feedback that you cannot push that further because that work is of a poor quality. So it's all about, then you have 2 things: moving work very fast through the system and catching quickly any problems at any stage, and making these feedback loops very, very tight, very, very quick, very fail-safe. But again, if that was just these 2 things, it wouldn't really be a viable solution, because as developers, we know one thing. One day you're sitting there writing your enterprise Java web sphere, and tomorrow you go to work and everyone's on Kubernetes deploying Quarkus and micro frameworks. So you really need to be adapting, and you really need to make sure that you are up to date, that you're staying current, that you basically don't let your processes become out of date, and your kind of practices that you follow. So these 3 things, flow, feedback, and continual experimentation and learning, are really crucial to kind of delivering something that lasts and something that makes it a quality outcome in the end. And I really like one kind of simple way to think about it also, is that DevOps is really about doing the right thing easy. Because if, basically you should be creating an environment where it's easy to write tests, where it's easy to deploy quickly, where it's easy to do the correct thing. Because when you make doing the right thing very difficult, people will inevitably revert to whatever is easy. So make sure that what's easy is the good thing, not the bad thing. And I think there is also one more misconception I just want to touch on about DevOps engineers. I think people often, when they say DevOps engineers, they mean this sort of dev and capital OPS, ops engineers. So they really mean people who spend most of the time working on the operational side of business, and kind of that's it. But really, there are 2 kinds. There are the capital DEV DevOps engineers, which are the people who are mostly developers, but have ability to deploy, have knowledge of continuous integration. Basically, anyone really who is helping improve that flow, improve the feedback loops, improve the continuous learning, they're DevOps engineers in my opinion, and I think that's also in Patrick Debois and his friends' opinions. So, we should listen to them. I would also actually add testers here. Testers don't really have DevOps kind of nice acronym like that, but testers are all about making these feedback loops tighter. So testers that kind of improve automated testing, improve understanding how you can do performance testing, how you can do the security testing, how you can speed it up and make the feedback loops tighter, they're also part of the DevOps culture, and we should not exclude them. So, whenever you want to go somewhere, right, you're going on a journey, the first thing you do, you take out your iPhone, you Google Maps, you want to find the Liverpool station. You need to first know where you are, right? Because otherwise you just know the end state, but you don't know where you're starting from. So the kind of equivalent of that would be looking at your own organization or your project and kind of starting to decide how mature are we, where are we on that journey? Are we already kind of mostly there? Because a lot of people who would not think that they're doing DevOps, they may be doing pretty well on that, and others who are making DevOps teams may actually be at the very beginning only. So I propose a few questions to ask yourself, like kind of think about your project, your organization, to see how far you are on that journey. First question, are your developers well integrated with other teams? Well, what I think is one big sign of a problem is that when developers just develop something, throw it over the fence, and then they just argue with testers, with operations people, and they don't really work with them because they imagine that their work finishes at the moment they press commit or merge that pull request, and that's not often not just the developer's fault. That could be equally organizational fault or just an oversight that we have this tendency to put like labels and silo things and saying, okay, well, you'll be the dev team, you'll be the operations team. You never have to meet, you never have to talk, but it will work great. So, that doesn't really work well with improving that flow and feedback. That's kind of quite against it. So yeah, just think in your organization, are developers working with everyone, or are they kind of an isolated group? And other groups as well. How fast and mature is your release process? Again, that's quite crucial to your DevOps maturity. Can you release often? Do you know how to do release, or do you do releases once a year and there's some massive event that includes run books written for 20 pages and some sort of ceremonies and rituals that no one really understands. Or is your release something that takes a couple hours and can be done at the short notice, and something you've done plenty? How efficient and effective is your testing? Again, people tend to, because DevOps does not include test in that, there is no dev test ops, which probably would help if it actually was called that. People like to forget about that. They think, oh, we have dev team, we have ops team, they're amazing. And yeah, they can do some testing, but who cares, ship fast. So often that creates problems, and you then end up with developers and operational engineers kind of very happy with themselves, but the business people and consumers disappointed because the product is buggy and basically often dangerous to use. Are you embracing automation where possible? That does not mean are you doing automation everywhere, because again, I should talk at some test meetup, I think, because and maybe ask questions rather than talk, because I think what's quite often the case is that people either don't automate at all when it comes to testing and key ideas, or they just want to automate everything, and what you end up with is just massive amount of unreliable automated tests that you just need to maintain forever, and in the end, no one really is kind of checking that the product actually works from the sort of user perspective, so to speak. So you will have thousands of automated tests, but in the end, you ship the product and it's buggy anyway. So, make sure you automate what's kind of suitable for automation. That's a large topic in itself. But also, I think it's more about, often teams do a lot of manual processes, but these processes would be easily automated, but no one's thinking that, okay, it's natural to automate that stuff. And there's some easy wins. And what you see is that once teams start to kind of embrace that DevOps philosophy, they will just start automating by themselves. People will just see it as a normal thing to automate, not to do manual boring work. And the last one is, well, are you constantly improving and learning? And that's actually the big one, because you may not be doing the previous four, but if you're actually putting regular thought and efforts into improving, you will get there on the other 4. But if you're not doing anything, things won't get magically better by themselves. And unfortunately, they do tend to go the other direction. So yes, I think that's actually the most important one. Okay, I'm here talking like it's really not a big deal, but DevOps can be quite tricky to start adopting. There are common challenges people face, and I'm lucky enough to work in a consulting company where I can kind of learn from other people and the challenges they faced and what are the most common ones and how to tackle them. So my kind of top list would probably be lack of in-house DevOps expertise. People would just say, we don't have DevOps engineers, we need to hire them. It's great to hire some DevOps engineers, but in the end, you've seen the whole flow, feedback, continual learning and improvement. That's not rocket science. If you're developers, you're operations people, you testers, you can start doing that stuff. You don't need permission. You don't need. You can even put yourself in a title if that makes you feel better. But it's not necessary. It's great when companies show willingness to go that way and they're actually hiring people with these titles. But it's not a prerequisite or not an excuse. People often use it as an excuse. Oh, we don't have a DevOps engineer, so hence we are stuck. There could be the opposite way. You can have maybe no management support for DevOps. Management say, hey, we're not going to hire these DevOps engineers and we're not going to do DevOps. We're going to do it the way we've always done it. Well, it's kind of moot point really, because as development team, you're allowed to improve, you're allowed to make better products. And again, you don't really need to undermine anyone's authority to do it. And, however, if you want to call it DevOps or not call it DevOps, is like, does not really make a difference, honestly. So, and in the end, management probably will see that you're getting better, and they will start themselves screaming, "Hey, we're actually doing DevOps, and it's amazing, and we didn't pay for it. It just happened, thanks to you." Lack of technical experience. Oh, Terraform is difficult, and this whole Kubernetes thing. I don't even want to think about it. Well, we have meetups like that by TRG, so that's one great thing. We can hear from 2 other speakers today on these topics, so you can learn firsthand some technical experience. There are just huge amounts of resources online you can use. There are huge amounts of blogs, videos, and it's not that hard. You've already developers, testers, operations engineers. You've learned all that hard stuff. This is no harder. It's the same thing. The barrier to entry is way lower than people imagine. And another one that people bring is like, hey, but now, we're going to go so fast so that the whole thing will be insecure. They'll be full of, we'll just get hacked probably. And the opposite is true. DevOps is not about lowering the quality bar. It's about raising the quality bar and raising the speed. And both are possible, and that's evidence in numerous articles and studies. And speaking about studies and articles, there are misconceptions around cost. People say, hey, it will cost us a lot of money. There are actual studies and there are actual hedge funds that are based around investing in companies based on their DevOps maturity. And I think the latest edition of DevOps Handbook talk specifically about that, which is fascinating. People actually think that stock market performance is linked to your DevOps maturity. So, I think it's expensive not to do DevOps if you're a company owner or if you care about these things. So, let's get on a journey. How do we start? Step 1. Identify your specific problems. You need to know what are your biggest problems. You've already probably looked at your DevOps maturity, and you may think, oh, my biggest problem is that we don't test, or we don't have any continuous integration, or our flow is very poor, or our feedback is very poor, or we never improve. Just think about some big targets and don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. I've been in an organization where people were saying, oh, developers are not allowed to go in Jenkins and, I don't know, deploy to QA or something like that, because that's blasphemy or something. And, you can actually challenge these things, and I've seen really government organizations and others kind of change their mind on that, which, is great. So let's think of some examples. You could be looking at deployment frequency. You want to improve that. You maybe want to make your IT more flexible. You maybe want to give some, because it's quite common that IT guys, operational guys are overloaded with small changes and things that developers could be picking up. So, identifying these targets to take on. And that firefighting operations team, I think, is very, very common barrier to entry, that people think, oh, we only have 2-3 operational engineers and they're super crazy busy, so how can we put more on their shoulders? It's not really about putting more on their shoulders, it's about everyone else kind of picking up the slack on their journey to production. So, you know what are your problems, you know what you want to achieve, you have a kind of rough ideas. Step 2, assemble your working group, or working group assemble. So, yes, kind of you want to find your DevOps Avengers, from different teams. Some of you are probably the DevOps Avengers because you're going to the meetup, you're interested to learn about that, but you may find that there is a tester there that is also really interested in kind of getting better. Maybe there is an architect that kind of read all about DevOps and doesn't understand why you're not doing it. So identifying those people in different areas that you can make kind of like your DevOps working group. It's really effective. I've seen it done. I was part of such a group, and I think we achieved something that we did not think possible. So we set our goal somewhere, and we ran past that goal and achieved a bit more. Of course, it's constant struggle because there are other forces that want to, the forces of darkness want to take back the progress you're making. But it's really, really great feeling when you making these improvements. So you have your working group, you know your problems. Next, you need to start connecting those silos. It could be maybe that already your development and testers are the best, best friends and eating lunches together and knowing each other and coming to each other's birthdays. But maybe there are architects and business analysts that sit in another building in some ivory tower and no one seen them in a year. So make sure that the people who are actually on the way from inception of the business story all the way to the development, that you know who those people are, and they're connected, that those people know each other, that they can work together. It's one thing that I really like in my current project, that's something I've never seen 2 years ago when I started, was I come to the office and I sit and I see an operational engineer sitting with a tester working on how to improve some performance testing problem. I see developers sitting with an architect discussing some design and kind of what are potential challenges. And it's just, people kind of take it for granted and they forget that, in the dark times, it wasn't like that. Everyone, they didn't even know each other. So yeah, connecting people, making some efforts, and your kind of working group can really help here, make those connections, because hopefully you have some people in each of these groups you can work with. Okay, set goals and deliver against them. That's the next step. You have your working group. People start to talk to each other. So now time to do the work. Action speaks louder than words, and you need to show results to achieve greater buy-in. You will have resistance. You will have cynics. You will have people saying, that's all just empty words, buzzwords, and no worth doing. But if you show people stuff like, hey, that deployment process that used to take 3 days. We've done it in 2 hours, 3 times this week. So suddenly, maybe you're not a Netflix or something, but you are miles ahead, and people do take notice, and people, sometimes your biggest opponents become your biggest advocates because they just see that they were wrong, and they sometimes, rarely, but sometimes people actually are very happy to be proven wrong and seeing that something can be changed and your work can become more fun. There is the growth framework, kind of like a coaching thing that's worth to look into, about setting goals, understanding your reality, thinking what options you have, and kind of deciding what you will do. I find it like a useful framework to think about the improvements and the way you'll fix your problems. Really, worth kind of good tool for choosing your battles. So things you can do, you can create dedicated team. One thing I've done in my previous projects, we actually had a special SEALs team, we call them, like Navy SEALs. We had a theme of marine animals as team names. Don't ask. But yeah, so SEALs, special team, they were both developers, testers, operational engineers mixed together, delivering basically pipeline, continuous integration pipeline, and they've done great. You need to measure the progress, you know, kind of get some statistics, how much code you know, how many stories you're pushing through, or how many defects you're managed to catch before. Just kind of quantify it. It can be different for your company or your team. And report the benefits to your working group. Often, you know, you may be seeing something amazing as a, let's say, as an architect, you suddenly realize that, okay, we're much more in line with what we should be doing, but the other parts of your working group may not realize that you're seeing some benefits, or testers might find the work much easier, much more rewarding, but developers not necessarily are informed of that. So just share, you know, share the successes, share the victories. People feel like what they do matter more when you tell them about the victories you achieve. And learn from the process, right? Every organization is different. Every organization have their own challenges. So learn how DevOps is special for you, and how you can kind of be aligned with the three ways of DevOps. And step 5, you know, start changing the culture. And that's really the most fun part. When you start, you have greater buy-in, and people are willing to really embrace changes across the whole organization. And you can make efforts global rather than local. You know, your special team is no more special team. It's a special organization you're part of. Everyone has that mindset. You know, we actually disbanded that team, and then the developers came back to the development team, operations came back to operations teams, so on and so forth. It's not really that important that you still have that separation, as long as people are working closely together. People have greater understanding, and basically what started as like this nucleus of DevOps is just spread and chain reaction. Everyone's doing DevOps. And you know, I'm kind of closing my presentation soon, so I'll just talk to you about rewards of DevOps. So, you know, what I've seen after we've managed to successfully go through that sort of DevOps adoption is morale is much higher. People stop quitting, which is great. You know, it's great to come and have the same guy every day sitting next to you. So that's great. And people are smiling more. People are happier at work. So the graphical representation here, it's not an actual photo of us, but it will have to do. And well, we did increase delivery speed. We managed to deliver something that everyone thought was undeliverable 3 months ago. We were set some deadline, and were literally told you cannot. Most people were saying that this is impossible to do, and this is just setting the whole project to fail. We delivered, so you know, it's great. And I'm sure they're very happy, the project sponsors as well. And I've seen automation start to appear everywhere. We had some kind of new, very specific deployment processes that we recently had to do. I can't really go into detail, but the point is that I did not even think about automating that. And I come to work next day, I see stories in the Jira, automate that, make it part of CI. And next week I come to work and it's all automated part of CI. And you know, you kind of don't have to be that sponsor anymore. People are just thinking that this is the natural, that's the right thing to do to make it part of the CI. And it's just like kind of the machine just goes on its own. You don't need to keep pushing it yourself. And well, projects and organization as a whole succeed, right? So that's the success that is at the end of that DevOps journey. So thank you for giving me a platform to speak here. Here are the five steps of the journey. And yeah, thank you.